Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the channel. My name is Sky, and today I have a real treat for you all. Today I'm bringing you a musket spec that is all about pure, unrelenting damage. The build we're going to be discussing is the Punisher. In this build, we're going to cover the strengths and role of the Punisher build, talent selection, armor and gems, super important stat distribution, food buffs, perks you should look for, and some good weapon pairings with this musket build. I hope you all are ready, because this build will skyrocket your kill count and make you an absolute monster if left unchecked. You want some damage? Well, you got it. Some of the strengths of the Punisher build is that it can 2 to 3 shot light armor targets. It is a god tier build for getting rid of those high priority backline targets. It has incredibly high sustained DPS due to the massive amount of body shot damage. It excels from long range, and it is very strong in all forms of PvP content. Those are some of the strengths. Let's move on to the talent tree now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we're in game right now. And to talk about the Punisher build, there's really 2 different routes you can go. It's a route with Power Shot, or it's a route with Sticky Bomb. In Wars, I would highly recommend going Power Shot and, using that as much as possible. But in Outpost Rush, I would recommend maybe Sticky Bomb. It is getting a buff as well in the next patch. You could deal some high AoE pressure. It really depends on your personal preference. So let's start off, let's say we're going with the Power Shot build, right? We're going to grab Power Shot, Powder Burn, and Shooter Stance. We're going to move down the talent trees. After we grab these 3 abilities fully decked out, we would move on to, some of the usual suspects. We want to grab Height and Precision for the stacking 2.5% damage increase. The Hit Your Mark for, more critical damage the farther they are away. Ballistic Advantage for no damage fall off, and Sniper. The reason we're not grabbing Empowering Headshot and Called Shot Resupply right now is because we're waiting to see how many points we have left over until we reach Tactical Reload. We're going to grab Salt on the Wounds for the execute damage, Empowering Weakness for the debuff damage as well, Hustle, and Tactical Reload. Now, after we grab Tactical Reload, we have 1 point left over. We can either grab Kick 'em while they're down for the 10% damage with, to a target with an active crowd control status effect, which is a slow, root, or stun, or we can grab 10% increased damage on a successful headshot. Personally, I'm going to grab Empowering Headshot. I try to get as many headshots as possible. If you're not that confident in your aim, I would grab Kick 'em while they're down. It's completely up to you. Now, if we were going the build with Sticky Bomb, I would go this route. I would grab Called Shot, move down the Powder Burn tree, move down the Shooter Stance tree. I'd grab Empowering Headshot, Height and Precision, Hit Your Mark, and Ballistic Advantage. The usual suspects, we're going to grab these. Sniper for the 3 times Optical Zoom plus the headshot damage. We're going to grab Salt on the Wounds for the execute. We're going to grab Empowering Weakness, Hustle, Tactical Reload, Kick 'em while they're down, and Sticky Bomb. Now, with this last point, it's personally up to you, but I like to grab the Weakened Defense for the armor penetration. With how many people play heavy armor nowadays, it's almost mandatory. So I would grab Weakened Defense for the armor pen, and that would be your build for that. Now that we've gone over the talents, let's move on to now armor and gems. So now talking about armor and, what you want on your armor, what stats, you want to go for raw damage, right? You want to go for the most damage possible. This build is not meant for the mid-range or anything like that or being up close. It's all about raw DPS. So what we're going to do is grab full Dex or Int on all of our gear. Dex Intellect, Intellect here, Dex Intellect, and Dexterity. It's like, you see a pattern here. It's all full damage. We're also on our jewelry going to try to get specific perks that we'll talk about later. But, you want to go raw damage as much as possible. If you have slots for the gems on these as well, you're going to want to grab either the Onyx gems for the physical damage absorption or this gem for the thrust damage absorption. It's entirely up to you. Either are really, really good. You're not going to make a huge mistake by putting those on armor, and which one is better, it's entirely up to you. Now for your weapon gems, this is where it does get important. You're going to want to grab elemental gems, the highest rank possible on your musket at least. And you're going to want to grab arcane only because It's great for PvE and PvP, considering not a lot of creatures out there are resistant to arcane. It's very, very, very rare. I don't even know if there is one right now. So grabbing arcane is great for all around. If you're strictly doing PvP with the musket, it doesn't matter. You can pick any one that you want. And for your melee weapon / off weapon, I would grab, I would consider grabbing another elemental gem, or if you want to do, more execute damage, grab that emerald. If you want more consistent DPS, grab the opal. It's entirely up to you at that point. Personally, I'm going to grab the elemental gem and, deal more damage that way. Okay, so now that we've talked about, a little bit about armor and gems, let's talk about now stats. This is where it gets very, very important. So now that we're in the attribute panel, it's very, very simple what you have to do. You're going to want to hit mandatory the 150 intelligence mark no matter what. Giving you the plus 15% elemental damage is very, very massive for your all-around damage, for your increased headshots, for increased body shots. It is just an increase in damage. It is very, very powerful. You also get the 10% crit to headshot damage. It's very, very good. And the rest of your points after that, you're going to want to dump the rest into dexterity. The reason you want to do that is because you want to get as close to that 300 mark as possible, so you could potentially eat a dexterity buff food to give you 300 dexterity and 150 intellect. If you can get 150 intellect and 300 dexterity, you're golden. You're golden. You'll be absolutely annihilating people. Personally, I haven't gotten there yet. I'm not close enough. I can get like legendary food buffs, but it costs a lot of money for something like that, and I wouldn't even consider it unless I'm doing it for a war that's important. But if you manage to get 300 dexterity, 150 int, you're god tier in damage. You'll be able to wipe out squads on your own. You'll be dealing automatic critical hits every 10 seconds. High consistent DPS as well. You'll be destroying people. So that's the primary, build you want to go. You don't want any in Constitution. Now let's talk about some food buffs and options that you might have. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so now that we're going to be talking about food, you have a couple different options for, depending on how much money you want to spend. Now, the smartest thing you could do, personally, is, get your cooking leveled up, either A, farm out the recipes or buy them, and, try to craft as many as possible so you never have to worry and rely on other people. You want to stay, consistent with just yourself, and just make sure you can craft it completely on your own with no strings attached, or, giving out a tip or whatever. Obviously, if you don't want to do that, you can just buy it directly off the auction house, but it can be kind of pricey. Let's start off with the first option, which is the braised wolf loin. It's going to give you 18 intellect and 12 dexterity. This is how much it is for me on the trade post right now. I think it's a solid food buff, especially once you get that higher gear score amount. It's going to come in handy really, really well. Next up, we have poacher's pie, which is 24 dex, 16 int. This is a little bit more expensive, but it is obviously more stats, so it's bound to be more expensive, and it doesn't seem that hard to obtain, so the price isn't that much, as much as other T5 foods. Now, for the final example, the fried albanyaha, or fried albanyaja, however you pronounce it, it increases dexterity by 40 for 40 minutes. So this is going to come in huge handy for things like wars, and if you're running multiple outpost rushes, it's going to come in handy big time. I personally found this recipe in Ebonscale Reach in the elite zones, so I farmed out my cooking as well to be able to craft these whenever I want. I'm going to be working on my fishing so I can go fishing whenever I want, but that's a story for another time. But personally, grabbing that fried albanyaha and grabbing the 300 dex and 150 intellect is going to be absolutely massive for me, so that's something I farmed out personally. Okay, so some good weapon pairings with the sniper build can really depend on what you're doing. If you are going to be dueling, then I would highly recommend something like the spear, or, the rapier, the hatchet, things like that. That could, get you out of sticky situations, deal some good damage, but your primary damage is going to be your musket. You know, if you're playing wars, I would recommend the bow or the musket. I've even seen people go musket ice gauntlet just for the CC that it does have. It does have some nice CC potential. I've also seen people go sword and shield musket for, you know, DPS rather than the rapier or spear. So that's an option as well. I mean, it really depends on personal preference, what you're best at, what your playstyle is. And, you know, just make sure you socket it with the nice gems and you should be good to go. It entirely depends on your playstyle. Just remember that in this specific build and this stat setup, your main damage is going to be from that musket. Now, if you're running musket rapier, they both scale off dex and int, so you would get a lot of value out of the attributes that you're running here. But it is entirely possible to go sword and shield and socket it with an elemental gem, or bow and socket it with an elemental gem. It's, you know, it's very, very possible. Just keep note that you won't deal the max damage with those items with this talent stack. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now to talk about some of the perks. You know, what's going to be the best thing to increase your raw damage, and what's going to help you bring those targets down easier. Now, for the best perks, there are Empowering Shooter Stance, Enchanted, and Crippling Powder Burn. Now, I know Crippling Powder Burn doesn't give you a raw damage increase, but it does give you a slow on the target for 5 seconds after you hit them with Powder Burn, which then leads you to land shots a lot easier. Empowering Shooter Stance is a huge, massive DPS increase while you're in Shooter Stance, which is really our go window, right? When we go in that Shooter Stance with the Powder Burn, it really means that we're looking for kill potential and we're going to try to take out that target. Even the Keenly Empowered gives you a 50% damage increase after a critical strike. Keenly Jagged paired with the Powder Burn deals massive, massive damage over time. Then we have some of the more obvious choices like Vorpal and Vicious. Vorpal is for specifically headshot damage, and Vicious is for critical damage increase. Now, critical and headshot are not the same thing. They are different on the muskets, so that's something to keep note of. If you're good at landing headshots, Vorpal can be good. Vicious is just for that critical, you know, RNG damage increase. And lastly, we have Jewelry. Now, what's good to have on Jewelry is the thrust damage perk, because it gives us 5% more thrust damage, which is most of our damage when it comes to the musket. At least if you have an elemental gem in, it's, you know, about 50% of it, because it does get cut in half with the thrust damage and the elemental damage on it. But either way, it is a damage increase, so we're going to grab that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap up this video on the Punisher build. I've had so much fun playing with this build, and I hope you will too. Remember, I stream live on YouTube every Wednesday and Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard, so please be sure to stop by, check in on me, and I would love to chat with you all. My name's Sky from the Comeback Kids, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!